Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to do an album review today, which is where I check out an entire album track by track, exploring each track in a vacuum and how it impacts the larger work. I'm going to tell you though, I think we're going to have a little bit less of that today. We're checking out Liturgy's 2023 93696. I have some experience with this group, and it has gone over my head consistently, musically and lyrically. I don't think this is going to be any different. So, we do have 82 minutes of music ahead of us. It's a double album, 15 tracks. I feel like this is going to be a rather lengthy video. On the plus side, as far as length goes, less than half of those tracks have lyrics to them. So, I won't be slamming my head against the wall regarding the poetry of this album as much as maybe on a different album. Let's get into it, starting off with the opening track. I think 2 minutes is a great way to start this. We'll discuss it a little bit, and then we're going to move into an 8-minute epic, which isn't even the longest track on the album. There's also a 9 and 2 14s, and one of them might as well be 15. It's right on the cusp. I'll be honest, I was a little hesitant to dive into this, kind of procrastinated a bit more than I should have today starting this project, just because I know this is going to be emotionally draining, mentally fatiguing, and probably a frustrating listen for me overall. But I'm here, got the camera on, headset's ready to go. Let's dive into this. And see where they take us. Track 1, Daily Bread. It's interesting hearing how they go about crafting a track like this. feel like it's right on the cusp of, I don't know. There's some interesting ideas in here. Not even just timbres, but like compositionally. I mean, that was kind of neat, using the glitch as a harsh transition. Now see, this is kind of a cool moment. Okay, drummer. Alright, that does go into our next track. What? I can't even say, like, what's going on here, because, like, this is just. This is just them. This is exactly what I expected coming into this album. It's noise, it's cacophony, it's glitch, it's black metal plus post black metal, avant garde black metal, whatever you want to call it. It is just a lot of things that I'm just not a fan of. I am a little envious of people who listen to this and absolutely love it. They want more of it. I know they have a pretty devout fan base. This is just on the complete opposite end of the spectrum for me subjectively. I would never, and probably will never again, listen to this of my own volition. And having heard the opening 10 minutes of this album, there's a part of me that wishes I didn't have to finish the album. I think this would be a really great combo, Daily Bread and Djennaration, for a single track reaction, a traditional reaction. I think it covers a majority of what the album is going to be showcasing because it lines up with what I know the band to do in their other works as well. I think this is pretty indicative of their style, and if the rest of the album is different than it, then they're going to be exploring new realms rather than working within what they typically do. So let's dive into this for a second. I'd mentioned Daily Bread was an interesting opening track to see how they would make something like that. The way I see it is, I think a lot of my perspective on this album is going to be from the perspective of religious ritual, primarily because that's what the band kind of is. The project is supposed to be spiritual, it's supposed to be religious, it's has its entire ideology and doctrine that goes behind, I believe, both the music and the lyrics to it. It is a rather comprehensive project. It is not just music, this is not just an album. This is art and even pushes beyond that to something I don't know that I have the word for. It is art as a medium. I do believe there's artistic merit to this on its own, but it's also created with the intent of pushing a religious or spiritual element onto the listener and to expose the thoughts and concepts of the artist to the world. It isn't just music, music just happens to be the medium. And so looking at Daily Bread from that perspective, it definitely leans into some of the tropes of, at least how I see it, Catholic religious music, particularly more of the solemn single vocal hymn stuff that we would see, possibly even that are sometimes used, usually by an organ or piano player, during communion services, the taking of the bread, hence why it's called Daily Bread. I do think that this is supposed to be drawing those parallels there. What I said it was interesting is that it immediately put me in that position, both by the instruments at play, primarily just a single vocal, but also the notes chosen, the heavy echo and reverb, and of course the title, Daily Bread. All of this, it had me from minute second 10, second 15. It did not take me very long to draw these conclusions. But it's all done in their style. It's heavily edited. There's a lot of production put on top of it. There's the glitch element that came in 2 or 3 times throughout there. It, to me, feels like someone approached them and said, hey, we know what kind of music you make. Can you dial back some metal? We need a communion song to play while people are partaking of the blood and flesh of Christ. And it's real dark from that angle, isn't it? No, and this feels like what they would produce. That's about as far as my perspective on Daily Bread goes. I think it is simply a way to kickstart the song, both ritualistically, to kickstart the album as a ritual, but also as an album intro track. It also introduces the melody line that kicks off Djennaration. This isn't simply just an intro track to the album, it's also an intro track to Djennaration, setting up some motifs and themes that we'll hear throughout the track. And maybe that's honestly the best place to start with it. Motifs and themes. As chaotic as it is, as noisy as it is, there's themes in Djennaration, at least 2 of them that crop up from time to time. I don't think there's very many parts of the track that don't focus on one of the 2 core melodies. They're hidden somewhere in all the layers. In the denseness, you'll find an instrument focusing on one of the 2 motifs we have in that track. It is full of moments that connect it all. I find that to be quite intriguing. Primarily because it's not what I would associate with them. It makes sense coming from the conceptual side of the album to have these connective tissues possibly throughout the entire album. I don't know that I'm going to be able to pick up on them throughout the entire experience. I barely picked up on the 2 that were in here, and for all I know, there were more than 2. I don't know. There's a lot going on. And a lot of production on top of that, which obscures some of the finer details. But it does seem not just on brand, but important to the specific concept they have in mind for their works. It would not surprise me if most of their music deals with motif and theme. But it is something I picked up in here. Now, we reached the point, let's talk about timbre first. There's some cool timbres in here. The guitars they're higher range focus than I would have expected. I don't know why. Liturgy is black metal adjacent, and black metal tends to favor higher EQ. A lot of older black metal, traditional third wave stuff, barely has any bass presence at all, and especially once we move to lo-fi stuff, it's all treble. So I don't know why I was thinking that this would have more bass heavy implementation, but I was a little surprised to find it so top heavy. Alongside the guitars, though, we also have a flute of some sort. The beginning, not the beginning, the first woodwind instrument I heard sounded like a traditional flute to me, but there was one that sounded more wooden later on, and maybe that was just my ears, maybe it was some of the textures it was paired with that was clashing and interacting with it, so it sounded different to me. Could have been the same instrument, but we had at least 1, maybe 2 different woodwinds here in this track, and then we also have the bells, the glockenspiel towards the end. We have a choir, I think, definitely an extended string section on the outside of the track to really give it this bigness. Um, I don't think I've heard anything from them with this type of instrumentation in it. Most of the stuff has been straightforward metal, two guitars, the drums, the screechy vocals, and maybe a bass. I gotta listen for bass next song. I was completely, I don't know, caught off guard here. I shouldn't have been. I knew what I was in store for, but I don't think that dulled the shock at all of being exposed to the 8 minutes of Djennaration. Which I also want to make a quick note on that. It's Generation, but it's spelled at the beginning DJ, just like gent or gin. And so if you were to pronounce it, you get degeneration or degenerate, something along those lines. I'm sure that's intentional on some level. I thought it might have been a play that they were going to go for something a bit more rhythmic in this one to bring in some gent, and then they did not. Generation is also spelled differently. The traditional spelling only has one N at the beginning, and this one has two N's, which makes me see the name Jenna in the middle of it. I don't know what the purpose is of that second N, but knowing this group, it means something. Everything means something. They have flowchart graph type things to explain the ideology of their music. Everything means something. But yeah, there's a lot of instrumentation in here to circle back where we were that I wasn't expecting, and I think it does improve my experience with this specific track at least. There are many moments in this song that did not click with me, but there were some that did. Well, there was one that really worked for me. I pointed it out, had a smile on my face. I pointed at the camera. I was like, this actually works. I don't know, some combination of those looks and body movements and vocal sounds. I was enjoying myself though. It was interesting. Prior to that, I think it was the first time the flute came in though. I'd mentioned that they were just on the cusp of something, and I'm still not sure what that is. But I do know that I was at a point of feeling like I could enjoy this. I wasn't yet, but I could. Part of that made me think about my own experience with noisy music in general. There's a lot of stuff that y'all introduced me to in 2019 and 2020 that completely bounced off of me, that I've listened to similar things recently and have enjoyed. In fact, I put some avant-garde noisy stuff in my favorite albums of the year, with Tangled Thoughts of Leaving. It's obvious that my threshold for more antagonistic styles of music is changing. It typically still needs to be paired with something else. I'm not here just for the noise. With Tangled Thoughts of Leaving, I was emotionally attached to it, and there's also the contrast on the album from the beautiful soundscapes on some tracks that contrasted with the noisy avant-garde stuff in other tracks. The experience as a whole was moving for me because I engaged with it on some level. I did not like the noise from a casual perspective. I would not just put one of the noisy songs on in isolation, but it is something that I don't think I would have even enjoyed at all or engaged with at all half a decade ago. So there's a part here where I was wondering maybe I might enjoy this in a few more years. Maybe it's me who is right on the cusp of finding some way to work with this. But I also think that the music was working towards something a bit closer to my ear, and we actually do see that towards the end of the track. when the tremolo picked guitars aren't focusing too much on dissonance, when they're trying to create something a bit more harmonious and allowing the texture of the tremolo picking to create an atmosphere around some beautiful melodic work going on with the flute and the bells, and then the choir or strings swelling in around the outside and just creating a really beautiful transcendental moment. I feel like that's what the earlier flute part was aiming for. I could feel like it was right there. It just hadn't taken the step into that point yet. And of course, we needed to go across this trek to make the journey to find this. That that moment of everything locking into place would not have worked in the middle of the track. It is a way to end it. You have to go through the journey to get there. And I think it's interesting that I felt that we had taken some steps toward that in the middle of the track. That's usually a feeling I get with slow burns, where I can feel like we're moving towards a bigger idea. This was not a slow burn. There's nothing in here that was a slow burn, but I got a very similar feeling, a similar reaction to what we were doing and where we were at. I find that fascinating. It's very rare for me to have feelings devoid of their usual context, for me to engage with music in a way outside of my expectations. I do not expect to have slow burn feelings on driving avant garde black metal. And yet, here we are. I think there's two other points I want to touch on real quick. One, just to get it out of the way, and the other is something I think we're going to return to every few tracks and explore how the album is accomplishing what I perceive to be a goal of it. The first is the vocals. I'm not on board with them. I've never really been on board with the vocals from this group. There was a part in this track where I actually thought I kind of wouldn't mind this as an instrumental, and that's not a thought I like to have. I've mentioned in the past that I'm not a big fan of instrumental albums if there was a version of it with vocals. I know some bands do this. I think Tesseract's done this in the past. Um, Actually, a lot of djenty and progressive metal bands tend to do this. I don't know why. But they'll like release an album and then like the next year they'll release an instrumental version of it. And I don't like that because to me it's saying, yeah, we have this member of the band, but they're not super important. We can release a version of our album without it. And then the wild thing is that it gets views, listens, whatever. It runs numbers. It's obviously something that works, or bands wouldn't be doing it, but I feel like it diminishes the efforts and impacts of one of your band members. It says that they're disposable. I'm not a big fan of that. If your intentions were to I'm getting off topic here. Let's get back to this group. It's not an idea I like to have though. I think art should be expressed the way that the artist want it to be expressed. And so for me to say, I would like this without the vocals is me saying that I know this art better than the artist. So I'm not a big fan of that perspective, but it's a thought I couldn't shake. Sometimes I listen to vocals I'm not a fan of and I say, okay, it's a texture, right? It complements the song in some way, but at least with Djennaration, I had a tough time seeing how it complemented it other than filling space. if we remove it, the song's definitely going to feel a little emptier, but we could fill that with another instrument. There is absolutely no way I was going to understand the lyrics. They don't have an emotional impact for me, and coming from a conceptual perspective, it doesn't feel like it's the best delivery method for what's going on. But you see, here we go again, me getting into that area of thinking I know the art better than the artist does. I don't know, man. Subjectively, though, it is not my cup of tea. I just, sonically, I don't get it. Conceptually, I don't get it. Would this work with clean vocals? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe not. Uh, but yeah, so I've said my piece on this. I'm gonna do my best not to bring up the vocals again. But, if they go unchanging throughout the album, just know that I'm probably still not on board with them. The other thing I wanted to bring up that I'm going to be exploring as the track goes on, as the album goes on, is the concept of religious ritual and spirituality. I feel like this song tries to aim for a type of enlightenment in it. I don't think every song is going to, nor do I think every song should, but I do think this one does. It creates noise and chaos and then finds a moment of pause and elation towards the end to cut through all of that. I don't know if every song is going to do something similar, but I could see people having spiritual awakenings or a religious experience while listening to this track. And I don't think I've said that about them before, despite the entire concept behind the project. But I do think they were right on the cusp of doing something very cool with this one. And maybe they even achieved it for some people. I am not the target audience here. I think it's going to be a harder sell for me to have some sort of introspective enlightenment from this album. Unless they do something drastically different. But I can feel it. And I think that says a lot about what they're doing. And it showcases, at least to me, why they have the fandom that they do. Or, I guess to put it another way, why their fans continue to come around to their work. Alright, I'm going to hit some lyrics on this. There's some other more general concepts that I think we could talk about, such as harmonic use and layers, but I'm pretty sure more tracks are going to do stuff along the same lines, and it'll be nice to kind of spread this out a little bit. I feel like most of the album reviews are very front heavy. We'll listen to one or two songs, have like an hour's worth discussion, and then the analysis sections get smaller as the album goes on, as many of the topics I've already tread. So, let's hit some lyrics. Yeah, I already knew this coming into it. I'm not gonna have the best lyrical dives and analysis today. I think this is the only track that actually has any annotation on it. It says it's an epic 8-minute span of brutal and theatrical display. And Ravina Hunt Hendricks expresses abstract ideas about the Christian imagery of the final judgment. I don't even know how to read it from that perspective. It kicks off, says, the quivers screeching in the air. I never believed the lore. I came to this for nothing. Now, I spent a little bit of time on this because I could not figure out what she meant by quivers. The quivers screeching in the air. So I went and looked it up. I can't find any definition of this word where it would be something screeching in the air. So, first line, I'm already lost. I never believed the lore. I came to this for nothing. My prayers fomenting in the basement, black fire flows everywhere, dead feathers consume the raider. Yeah, like what? It's all so vague. It's abstract. It's just about as abstract as the music is. Which I have a thought on that. Give me a second. Let's continue on this a little bit. There is one repeated stanza. Says, we'll unbutton everything, a hornet cut in half, hoarding up pink little veins, giving power to the lamb. I don't know. Here's the thing, though. There are elements in the lyrics that I can kind of feel. I can't pinpoint what lines or stanza give them to me, but there's an overall feeling of place, wanting to know your place, trying to understand how things work in here, and an aim for something transcendental. There are a couple of times when it talks about everything will unbutton everything, which almost seems to be about laying everything bare. To remove the veil on everything, which to me is about knowledge. It's about knowing everything. But also says, when I searched for everything. Another line says, when I sought out everything. There is a consistent element in here about knowledge, it seems. To have an understanding of how things work. Again, like the music, it's more of a feeling. I can't really point to anything specifically. It's just, I know what I felt while listening to this track. Alright. Well, I don't feel like that was a great analysis, but I already knew that was going to happen. Like I said at the beginning, I don't think I'm going to be able to draw any large conclusions by the end of the album, but maybe we'll be able to talk about some of the musical concepts that are employed throughout. I don't know. Maybe I'll just have a good journey alongside me exploring this art, even if we end up on the other side not really understanding it. Let's continue on with Caela. The very harsh sounds. It's quieter than where we left off, but it feels louder. Okay, there is bass in here. It's nowhere near as prominent in the mix as the guitars are, but it's present. It's not hard to hear. It's interesting too, at the end of Djennaration we had a bit more of a groovy side of things. There's an interesting correlation on these two tracks where the transcendental section appears to line up with high-pitched instruments. And I wonder if that's why the vocals are how they are. Okay. Oh, of course. So I feel like I should have stopped after Caela. The fun playfulness there. All right. Technically, I guess those two go together, because the reverb from Angel of Sovereignty continued on into Haelegen II. But I gotta stop here because we gotta talk about Caela. Like I said, I think we should have stopped after Caela. I didn't know Angel of Sovereignty was going to be like Daily Bread as a hymnic intro to a major song. See, this is something interesting in here. Is Djennaration is 8:20. Haelegen II is 9 minutes. 93696, the title track, is 1450, and Antigone II is 1408. Every other song is short. And I'm talking between 1 and 3 minutes. Very interlude-y. There are a couple of standouts against that. Before I Knew the Truth is 4.5, and Ananon is 5. Angel of Individuation is almost 6. But something that I want to point out is that all the tracks that are on the longer side have lyrics. A vast majority of the interlude or shorter tracks do not. And so I wonder if I shouldn't just keep my attention on where the big ones are, and if they have a shorter track that comes before them, and just assume that they're going to move into it like Daily Bread does with Djennaration and Angel of Sovereignty does with Haelegen. Just a pattern I'm picking up. Caela. Caela? Is that a hard C or a soft C? See, this is what I'm talking about with language, man. If we had used an S or a K, we would have been just fine. I don't know why the C exists. We don't need it. The C's job is just to make the language confusing. It does the same job as two other letters, and you never know which one it's going to do. It just does. Catch starts with C, but cease also starts with C. One's a K and one's an S sound. Is this Caela or Caela? I don't know. Anyways, it is noisy. That may end up being a running gag. I don't know. I didn't mean it. As soon as I said it, I was like, wait, that's what I said about Djennaration. Pretty sure that was the first thing I said about Djennaration too. It starts out with a single tone over and over and over, and it's noisy. And I don't just mean that in like the idea that there's a lot of clutter. It's just, it's grating. I don't know if anyone else feels that, but between the pitch of it and the compression and distortion and overdrive on it, it is just, it's like a drill in my brain. Just, I did not like it at all. And when the drums came in and it continued on in the background, I was like, oh, geez, this is just going to be how the song is, isn't it? And it kind of was for a while. Um, I didn't really enjoy that at all, but the song evolves in ways that I think were interesting. Towards the end, we introduced a new instrument that feels like the enlightening, the weight being lifted off, especially after some of the heavier blast beat stuff that we had towards the beginning as well. That led way to groovy drum elements, and then we got this high pitched instrument on top of it. And I mentioned something about elation or transcendence and high pitched instruments. I do think that there is a correlation there throughout history. There's even a metaphorical thing there where the earth tends to be below us and the heavens, the afterlife, above us. We look to the stars to see where we go next. Very rarely is the afterlife presented as something below us or in the same realm as us, though some religions do have an afterlife below us. It's usually not a good one, although that's not 100% consistent either. But especially here, as I mentioned, I still get a lot of Catholic elements from this. I don't know if they specifically draw inspirations from Catholicism and Christianity for their musical inspirations, but it is something that I am seeing a parallel of, at least in these two tracks here. Actually, the four tracks here have all sort of leaned into that a little bit. But the idea that higher pitched music is above the song and thus it would feel higher and thus it would be more attuned with whatever's above us. I don't think that is incorrect. It may not be the whole picture, of course, but it is an analogy I think that works, is accurate in some ways, and may be carried over here, whether intentionally or subconsciously. But we've had two moments where I feel like the song is particularly pushing towards a type of transcendence, and both of those moments have had higher pitched instrumentation alongside it. The flute the first time around, those high pitched glockenspiels the second time around in Djennaration, and I can't remember what the instrument was here, but it was super high pitched, way up there. It was shrill almost, to where it was so high pitched of a frequency that it was bordering on painful. And high pitched, shrill, not a sound I enjoy. I didn't want to bring this back up. I said my piece on vocals, but I do think it's interesting that how I described that instrument at the end of Caela is the same way I described the vocals. And I thought about that instrument in the context of transcendence. I wonder if that's why the vocals are the way they are as well. There's obviously the ties to black metal here. I think the vocals are stuff we've heard in other black metal bands, particularly the range in depressive black metal. That shrill screechiness that can come uh, through it. But I wouldn't say that these are depressive black metal vocals. They just sort of occupy a similar texture. But what I'm getting at, anyways, getting off topic here, is that there is the black metal element in the music and the vocal style, but I also feel like the vocals themselves are, they mean something. They're not just shrill and high pitched screeches because that's what they are. It might be that that's just how the vocalist does harshes. Maybe. I'd wager, though, that it probably has more to do with something that they wanted. They might have had to work to find or to achieve this style of vocals, and that it's purposefully done. I don't think most people just naturally try to do harshes and wind up with this screech and say, okay, that's what we're doing. I think most people would be like, that's a little off. I got to keep working on it. And that's not to say that the screeching is poorly performed or anything like that. Um, just that it's not what I think most black metal vocalists are aiming for. Something similar, they're in the right ballpark, but there's something very distinct about it that just isn't very metally. Um, and so, like I said, to me it feels like something that was expressly done. There's an intent to find that style and to lean into it. And I wonder if the pitch is a part of that. I don't know. Um, One thing I just want to bring up, I think we'll talk about it more in the future, but it is something I'm noticing is glitch. This is something that I've noticed in other liturgy tracks as well. I think that's the third different way I've pronounced the band name. Maybe while I pause for lyrics, I'll go look up the proper pronunciation, because I know that's a real word. It's some group in a church or something like that. Um, I gotta figure out the right way to say it so I can be accurate for the rest of this video. But it is something I've noticed in their other works as well. It's used sparingly, and I think that's interesting. It's something in their repertoire, it's something in their palette that they know can be overdone and choose not to. It is used in specific moments to achieve a specific effect at that specific time and never anymore. It's frequently used as a transition, though, which I find intriguing. I don't know what to make of it yet. I don't really know what to make of much of the glitch yet. It's just something that they do. And like I said, it's so sparingly used, I haven't really found a pattern as to why or when it gets implemented. And I think that's interesting too, because normally when you say a band mashes genres together, it's usually an equal portion, or at least equal representation. If I tell you that somebody's mixing metalcore and electronic music, you're probably going to expect synthesizers or even catchy electronic beats or melodies in most of the song, if nothing else, predominantly featured in two areas. And I think those would probably be like the bridge and the intro. You'd probably hear them. Like you just expect them to be represented in a majority of the track. But here, I can't really say that they're influenced by electronic glitch music because it's not something that shows up often. It's like a little thing that they have in their back pocket every once in a while. They're like, oh yeah, I got one of these. And we'll glitch the song for a second. It doesn't really feel like an inspiration from any other genre of music, and it's more of something that they just do. It's a tool they have. They remember it every once in a while, more so than something that feels like an innate element of their composition. This feels like something they have to remember they can do. And I find that interesting. Well, I suppose I find it more intriguing than interesting. Why is this happening? More so than anything else is my thought process regarding this. Why bring it up here? Why utilize it in this section? Why not utilize it in this other section? What makes a part of the song special enough to get glitched and another not? It's not like it's used every time they need a harsh transition. Sometimes they just move from one idea to the next, smash cut style. Uh, I don't know. I don't see any rhyme or reason to it. It just happens sometimes, and there aren't really any elements of the track that feel, or any elements of the album that feel electronic or influenced by glitch art aside from those small sections of the experience so far. It's just kind of mind-boggling. I don't get it yet, and so like I said, I just kind of want to put it out there. I'm thinking about it. I don't know what to make of it yet, though. It's very perplexing. Lyrics. Caela is focused on finding the self. I don't know what that means. Quite beyond the scope of that very broad phrase. It starts off though, says, follow me into the jaws of love, into the clothes of future sons as progeny, and then into the clothes of the sun, the star. So we actually have changing words there despite having the same pronunciation. Into the clothes of future sons, into the clothes of the sun. I don't know. Square away the citizens, evaluate the alchemy, slide right through the gash. Evaluate the alchemy is an attempt to figure out what it is that something is, and life, identity, could be seen as alchemic. But I only reach that conclusion because of what comes next. says, observe the force inside you that made you who you are, that's turning you into something that you'd abhor. Later on, saying, turning up mauve and hawthorn bones, coughing up memories better left alone. There's a lot of concept of identity in here. And maybe that's what it means when it says, follow me into the jaws of love, into the clothes of future sons. To figure out how to love oneself and how to understand oneself by who we are, maybe not just us as a singular, but us as a group in the future. Who we become. I don't know what the clothes of the sun is, though. But it's like, it seems to me about taking a step forward and saying, who are we going to be? We both singularly and plurally as a human race. Who are we going to be in the future? Take a step and perceive that. Imagine what that's like. Imagine what it's like for. I really like the idea of the jaws of love. Not necessarily the phrase itself, but following somebody into love found in the future. Maybe it's just the concept of enjoying who you are. If you don't like who you are now, imagine a future where you do. But there's a force inside that could turn you into something you won't like. That's also a potential future. Cough up memories better left alone. So he says that you could go through the history. It says, turn up the hawthorn bones, go through the past, what has led you here, and find all the mistakes you've made. But sometimes those memories are better left alone. Sometimes it doesn't matter how you got here, it's more dependent on where you're going. It's more important to figure out the path you need, one of love, to reach a future where you find that you enjoy who you are. More so than focusing on the negativities of the past, which could transform you into somebody that present you and possibly future you will also not like. We also have the idea that says, I could never endure a seance that didn't observe my faith. This kind of goes back in line with the turning up bones, more of a spiritual side than a physical one. That's, digging through the remains of the past physically. A seance would be digging through the remains of the past spiritually to commune with those who have passed on. I think that's another way of talking about bringing back the past to the present. Says, I would never do one of those. I would never dig through the past if it wasn't beneficial to my thought process now, that didn't observe my faith. I think that's what it speaks about. It's about growth in general, about ensuring that the person you become is the person you want to be, built off the ideas and victories of your past, while also observing the specific mistakes you've made, not to dwell on them, but to find the ones that resonate with you and craft a moment where you decide to do something better and become someone better in order to be in the jaws of love in the future. Does that make sense? I don't even know at this point. Yeah. If I'm anywhere near on track with this one, I'm just going to call it luck. I don't think I'm going to be anywhere near this on any other track here. It's just what. And honestly, I think I'm grasping at straws because There's nothing in the music I think that could tie back to that, but I think that's just going to be normal. Like the ties that we're going to have thematically between lyrics and music is mostly going to be feeling. Concepts of, once again, transcendence, of spirituality, meditation, not clairvoyance, clarity of mind, stuff like that. And I think having deep, thoughtful lyrics go along with some of the introspection that the music is implying. Again, I don't really think that I've engaged with much of the music on the level that it wants me to. I wish I could. The music just doesn't click with me that way, but I feel like the lyrics are pushing for something similar. And that's where a lot of the thematic resonance is going to occur as the lyrics meet the music. All right. Now, I suppose we didn't talk about Angel of Sovereignty, but I don't know that there's much to say there that I didn't say in Daily Bread. It's going for much of the same tone, it's just a different execution on the same concept. Creating those ties with more of the Catholic ritual that you would find in sermons and, not sermons specifically, what would you call them? When you go to church, the whole rigmarole of it all. The prayer, the singing, the sermon, the communion, mass. I don't know. What is it called? Service. A church service. Yeah, there we go. So that's where Angel of Sovereignty sits, much like Daily Bread. And I wager we'll see more of that throughout this album as the parallels are continued to be expressed and maybe even honed in further. So let's dive into it. Haelegen II. We're going to take a break after this one since it is a 9-minute track, and then we'll finish disc 1. It'll be about 9 minutes combined there. It's track 6, 7, and 8. Beginning to develop some thoughts on the use of noise in the transcendence components of the music. It's interesting to hear so much bass frequency on this one too. The previous 4 songs have been treble heavy. This one feels very rooted, very grounded. The glitch, why? Why was it there? I don't know. It's a very cool texture that they're achieving with this clean vocal bit. I wrote down a phrase that I think is, I don't know if the phrase is 100% what they're going for. It might be something similar. Disgusting beauty. There's quite a few sections of this album, particularly in Djennaration and Haelegen. I don't think we had too much of it in Caela, but I'm sure we'll see more of it going forward. Of beautiful, uplifting, serene composition, usually leaning more towards a classical side of writing, surrounded by avant-garde, noisy metal stuff. Tremolo picking, dissonance, drums going wild, constantly changing up rhythms, treating it like a giant drum fill, honestly. There's little consistency or care for the general timing of the rest of the instruments, and the drums are just doing whatever polyrhythmic things they want to do. Sorry, I had a hiccup there. We certainly saw this there at the end, and it's where things began to click, but retrospectively, yeah, in retrospect, I can see this being applied to tracks prior. I don't know what the purpose of it is yet, and I don't know that disgusting beauty is really the words that I want there, but it is about pairing things that are traditionally gorgeous or serene, creating these beautiful sonic landscapes, and pairing them with noise. Disgusting is probably the wrong word. I do like beauty, I think is right, but disgusting is not. It's just noisy, it's dissonant, it's cacophonous. It is the opposite, but when paired together creates something overwhelming. The contrast, the opposition creates something new. The schism there is a defining factor to the characteristic of the sound. A question I held at the end was, would this sound better with just the beauty? I thought subjectively, yeah, maybe. But I asked myself a different question just after that. Would it sound more gorgeous without the cacophony? And I don't even know if I could say yes to that subjectively. There is something about the weight, the noise, the layers and density of dissonance and rhythm that aid the general sound that's going on. It supports the vibes. Somehow, the noisy elements make it more beautiful. The dissonance brings out the consonants. Is this the add salt to your sweets trick? I don't think so. I don't think everything that is sweet and beautiful and serene is going to be embellished by adding something noisy and cacophonous to it. But I do think that they specifically have honed in on a vibe that works in their in their field, in their own little way. Again, not a universal trick, but a good tool. And they're utilizing the tool well within their project. And I think that's what a lot of this boils down to. And it might even be why some of the sections that shouldn't work for me kind of do. They sort of border on that. There's still a lot of moments in here that I'm like, nope, don't like it. I think I understand what they're going for, but it is not my cup of tea. But there's other parts I'm like, I shouldn't like this, but it's okay. It's doing something. There's a special piece to the equation of this group, and I don't quite know what it is. Maybe it's something hidden beneath the surface. Maybe it's in plain sight, but I just can't see it. But it makes this different than other noisy avant garde projects that we've listened to in the past. It also makes it different than earlier stuff from this group. This is their latest album, 2023. This came out in March of last year. It's not even a year old, though. Very close. There are moments of this that are quite a bit more harmonious in ways than anything we listened to off of their 2019 Hack or Hawk. Don't remember how to pronounce that. And I think that's there was one more album that we checked out. Oh, Origin of Alimony. Alimonies. I think we checked out something from. Oh, wait, one of the tracks is called The Separation of Hawk from Hail. I mean, I know everything's interconnected on some level, but I didn't know it was like that deep. I don't know. But yes, this is more effective, I think, at what they're aiming for than anything else I've listened to, which tends to be very heavily dependent on enjoying dissonant avant-garde metal. This is attempting in some ways to find an audience outside of that, to make something evocative outside of a metal interest, outside of a noise interest, and I think it's working. I don't know what this special piece is. I don't. It's invisible to me, but it's effective. It's present, whether I understand it or not. I continue to think about the glitch, what it means, why it's here. We had it a few times in that track. I don't know why. But I did think about something. Broken media. I don't know if that's necessarily what they're going for here as far as vibes are concerned or artistic intentions. But many of the times that I hear the glitch, the playing the same beat over and over and over and over before doing a hard transition to something different, is it reminds me of CD skipping. Especially if it's a small scratch. You might skip a few times, repeat the same idea, and then you're lurched forward 10 seconds into the song. That's what this feels like to me. Through that lens, I don't know if they're necessarily utilizing it to talk about or to bring up the concept of deterioration of physical media. But the end result is that these songs feel like they're skipping. Not the idea of replaying an idea over and over like a needle that's skipping, but the idea of jumping forward in time, of skipping a portion of the song to get to something in the future, which is a theme we explored in Caela. The understanding of time and how it changes us and how we should look towards the future in hopes to see someone who we would want to be, to make that time skip and then take the steps to get there. Basically, to have a plan in mind, but to envision the end result first. If you can see it, you can do it, or something along those lines. If you, man, what is that phrase? If you can picture it, you can build. I don't know. Y'all know what I'm talking about, though, I hope. I highly doubt that that's going to be the general idea throughout most of this is time skipping, but it is something that I've thought about, especially with the concept of imagining the future put in my head from the last track. There's also another element to the glitch, though, and that's simple repetition. We see repetition in a lot of places throughout the track. Most of our intros are very repetitive, starting with a single repetitive idea and building off of it. The rest of the track tends to deviate away from this, but our intros tend to be heavily steeped in a type of repetition. This repetition has been grating on me at times, like in Caela. It has been just something that is, like in Haelegen II. I don't really have any strong feelings about the intro to it. It's an intro. It gets us into the track. But the glitch kind of does that too. It's a way of introducing short, tight, repeated loops in the middle of the track without playing the same thing over and over on an actual instrument. Now, repetition has been used in other songs we've listened to, sometimes for simplicity's sake, like in punk music, where the simplicity is sort of the ethos of the music, but also in slow burns. Primarily post-rock or post-metal utilizes heavy repetition in order to create a trance-like state. We also see this in rhythmic-oriented prog rock and prog metal, stuff like Meshuggah or Bridges in later Tool work. I wonder if the idea of trance, of introspection, of transcendence and elevation are also what's tying into the use of the glitch. I'm still trying to figure out why it's there, where the influence comes from, and maybe this is it. I don't think it ever lasts quite long enough for me to say, oh, this was definitely designed to be meditative, to be trance-like. But it is a type of repetition that plays into longer, lengthier repetition that we do have that feels like it could lead towards more trance-like listening. I don't know. As usual, I think this is the third time I brought glitch up, and it's the third time where I'm going to say I'm spitballing. I'm still thinking about it. These are some ideas floating around my head. I don't know what's going on though. Um, lyrics. It starts off, Haelegen, take me to Haelegen, take me home. Take me to Haelegen with everyone. I don't know what Haelegen is, but this is called Haelegen II, which makes me think that it's a sequel to another song, possibly in their back catalog. Although I'm also seeing we have a Red Crown 2, we have a reprise of this track on disc 2, we also have Antigone II and Immortal Life 2. Are there really that many callbacks to older works? And, more importantly, how many musical callbacks have existed already? If there are thematic ones, which I know there are, all these albums, or most of the albums at least, are designed to be a way for Ravina to get her ideology out, right? To express it through music. So we do have that conceptual component that ties them all together. We also have title components that tie them all together. Let me check this out real quick while I'm talking. But if that's true, are there any musical tiebacks? Okay, so Red Crown comes off of Aesthetica. Aesthetica? I think it's Aesthetica. Haelegen comes off of the Arc Work. So yeah. I don't see all of them though. Immortal Life and Antigone, I suppose, are the two that I can't seem to find an album that they come off of. But that's okay. I'm sure. Oh, I didn't check EPs though. Anyways, what I'm getting at here is that there's callbacks to other albums in multitudes of ways on the literary side of things. Title tracks, lyrics, concepts. I wonder if there's any musical tiebacks. Just how deep does this go? How long would it take to to do the red chord on a cork board between all the ways that those various albums connect to each other. I don't know. I'm kind of intrigued by it. Um, oh, we got onto this because I don't know what Haelegen is. However, there is a stanza later that says, I'm sorry I could never fully generate heaven, Haelegen. Gonads split open every time I try to tuck away. Take me to Haelegen. Monads, cold hands, I bristle at the monumental errors of Haelegen. Close up nations in my blinds, take me home. So, at the end of every line in that stanza, we have the lines from our opening stanza. Haelegen, take me to Haelegen, Haelegen, take me home. But it directly puts Haelegen next to heaven. And I'm curious if that's what this is to take me to the afterlife. Maybe not heaven in particular, but that Haelegen is whatever the afterlife is in this ideology. I don't know. After that, though, we have two exceptionally lengthy verses, we can call them. I completely forgot about this. It's the part where we have the clean vocals, the monotone, clean vocals over and over and over. Wait for the bulk of the clay, for the circular squall, for the peak of the fray. I collide with the ram. I go home with a soul. I go home with a soul. I return my heart to the pattering snow, to the moaning guitar. It's the same here below. It's the same on the lamb. It's a broken valise. Collarbone broke free as I planted the stakes in the back of the beast in the lee of the stone to the north of the east. It's interesting because I just got done talking about repetition, creating trance-like listening experiences. And I do think that these vocals could have leaned into this. They are repetitive, they tend to use the same notes, and they tend to use similar rhythmic patterns, but they don't come across that way because there's so much stuff going on around them, but also because I think a little bit of the digitization, whatever effects are being put on the vocals here, in order to create the texture of them that leans into all the chaos around it. It helps it stand out a little bit, but not enough to be as something you can focus on. It does stand out though, being clean vocals. We have not had them in a non-interlude or non-intro track before, and I'd like to hear more of them, particularly there at the end where we had the two guitars and bass, we had the drums going crazy, we had the sound floor created from the clean vocals and the monotone, the texture of all that, and then the screams on top. I thought it was really well done. It creates a vibe that it works for what they're doing. It really does. I don't know too many bands who could pull off all those sounds and make it listenable. As chaotic and dissonant and gnarly as it is, there's a heightening to it. Like I said, a little special sauce that they got. And I don't know what it is, but it works. Coming back to the lyrics, though, I have no idea what this is about. We have somebody who wants to get to Haelegen and talk about all of the. I don't know, it almost seems like they're tired. I've done all of the like that all that stuff that I read was just the first verse. There's another verse just as long. It talks about all the stuff that they've done. It just makes it feel, especially with the monotone, ba 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 ba. Everything just kind of blurs together lyrically. The contents of the stanza, the contents of the lines don't really mean as much as the feeling of it. I did this and I did that and I put this there, and it just feels so rote. It's just what it is. And then the screaming. I don't think that the vocal the harsh vocal is something that necessarily connects with me on an emotional level, but it does feel more passionate and more emotion-full than the monotonous clean vocals do. And so we have this recurring bored, I did this and I did that. And then we have someone screaming, take me to Haelegen. That's what I get out of this track. Also, the final stanza is just two lines. It says, creation lurches up at heaven. The hedge fund bros control the reef. And there's so much strong poetry and fantastic language being utilized in the album so far. It definitely is written by somebody with a vast vocabulary and a knack for whimsical poetry. And then at the very end, to just bring up hedge fund bros, it feels so out of place in a way that catches me off guard. It kind of cracks me up. I don't know if it's intended to be comical. It's just almost everything in here lyrically feels not necessarily timeless, but like it could embody quite a wide range of time. I think there is going to be, it's going to feel dated at some point, but I don't know when that point is. Except that line is going to feel very 2020s. It definitely feels like a phrase of today, and I think as soon as it goes away and we stop using that phrase, maybe in 10, 15 years, maybe it never goes away, I don't know. But when it does, that line is going to feel very odd against everything else, which has a timelessness to it. All right. Oh, there we go. Dang, I pushed that button like 3 times. We got, I don't know what I said, like 9 minutes in the rest of the album. We have 4 minutes for Before I Knew the Truth. This has lyrics. Angel of Hierarchy and Red Crown 2 come after that. They are instrumentals. That's going to round out disc 1. And I'll probably take a little bit of a break there myself. It is noon now. It'll probably be about 12:30 by the time I wrap this up. I'm going to grab some food and then I'll come back rejuvenated to finish off disc 2. As usual, y'all will just see a smash cut. But I think it'll be nice to take a break from this, particularly because here's something I haven't talked about yet. I'm listening to this wrong. A lot of the music leads into the next track, and I kind of screwed that up with Angel of Sovereignty into Haelegen, but I think even Djennaration went into Caela, and Haelegen II goes into Before I Knew the Truth. There's only one harsh stop, and I think that was after Caela into Angel of Sovereignty. It's designed to be taken in all at once, and that's just not something I can do on this channel. Unless we do something like during the week when I get a special selection for a full album that's one track and I digest the whole thing. But I don't think those analyses are strong enough for me to call them album reviews because I don't take the breaks every once in a while to discuss them. So, there's just no way I can listen to this in the intended way and present a first time reaction analysis that's cohesive. But I do think I'm missing part of the experience, and I do think this is an experiential album. I don't think this is something that you're really supposed to dig into until second, third, fifth time through. It's your first time you're supposed to feel it. And I'm not getting that. So I figure since I'm already listening to it wrong, taking a break in between discs is probably okay. But I also wonder if the album would work better if I just left it on and took the whole album in one go. Anyways, let's finish this disc up and see what's going on in our final 10 minutes of it. Something I haven't really discussed much is how the two guitars play off of each other in a very Mars Volta style. It's been doing this whole album, but this right here is a really good representation of that. The moments of groove always catch me off guard. It kind of works well with them though. Very heavy repetition with this guitar lick. It's been going on for just about 2 minutes now. I do think those glitch sections work well as palette cleansers. It is a harsh transition, but it feels less harsh. I feel like we've heard this rhythmic pattern. Earlier in the album? Oh, of course there's a harsh stop right there. There's also lots of angels. We have Angel of Sovereignty, track 4, of Hierarchy, track 5. Disc 2 starts with Emancipation, and track 5 is Angel of Individuation. I have a virtual instrument that sounds just like this. Like no effects. I don't have to put anything on it. It just sounds just like this. You know what's interesting is the harmonic palette on display here. It never really dawned on me just how diverse the writing in this album could be harmonically. The chords that's being utilized, keys that they're in. "10 seconds of silence." Interesting choice. You know, I was going to say that I failed to understand the purpose of these last two tracks. Because from an album standpoint, they sort of disrupt the album's flow. But I think if I return back to the idea of the ritual, that makes more sense. Yeah. I think if I return back to the idea of the ritual, that makes a lot more sense. Alright. Before I knew the truth is Honestly, if we remove some of the aggressive production and the vocals is 100% something Mars Volta would do, maybe not in excess as the track is. It is literally 4.5 minutes of those two guitars just kind of battling it out with those tremolo picked swirly bits. Actually, that is it, isn't it? There wasn't a single. Oh, we had the toy piano thing at the end, little music box for like the last 30 seconds, but otherwise, that's like it. That's yeah, that song gets a little long on the tooth, I think. It does have some variation in it though across the track. Rhythmically, vocally, we bring in some clean vocals tucked way underneath towards the end of the track. But yeah, it's kind of a one trick pony, a one track idea. One idea track. That's where I wanted to go with that. In a way that none of the other tracks really lean into. As I mentioned, a lot of these tracks tend to focus on a single repetitive idea for the intro, and I thought that's what that was, and then we just stuck around with it. Even through all the glitch transitions, they tend to transition right back into that same guitar lick. The drums might have changed, the vocal patterns might have changed, the bass might have been doing something different, but the two guitars were doing the same thing. Hmm. Angel of Hierarchy, though, and Red Crown 2, as I said, they sort of disrupt the flow of the album. We have a wavy piano, and then we have Red Crown 2 brings us almost like finger tapping, like just tapping your fingers on a table or something, as the percussion and a recorder, a flute, clarinet, something in that family of woodwind. Definitely feels more wood to me though than something more metallic like the flute. They're so different from everything else. They aim for, well, they're not really different. I was gonna say they aim for beautiful sensibilities, but they always diminish that in a way. The waviness, the warbliness of the piano in Angel of Hierarchy creates dissonance through the pitch adjustments that come through there. And Red Crown 2 has dissonance baked into it. There is a harmony that often occurs in. Are there two woodwinds there? Why do I remember harmonic dissonance? I can hear it. I know it's there. Just maybe there are two woodwinds. I don't know. But there are many chords that get held out where it's tension, it's dissonance. The wavelengths are clashing. So compositionally, they're pretty on par with everything else, pairing beautiful sounds with dissonance and noise, chaos, clashing. It's just everything's kind of toned down a little bit. The beauty of it is singular. We just have the one instrument, and the chaos is singular as well. Instead of noise on the rhythmic level, noise on layers, it is just noise harmonically. We have dissonance implemented in them. So it kind of takes the large ideas that we've been hearing and compresses them down into something that is similar but smaller. But I do think it does well, does it disrupt it? See, this is what I was talking about earlier where I think it's better to listen to the album as a whole. Daily Bread and Angel of Sovereignty already introduced moments like these, smaller sections that cut in between or before larger, heavier, denser tracks. We've sort of been on this roller coaster ride of highs and lows for the entire album. Ending on two lows isn't really disruptive, even though it might feel that way. And I think it's because we just came off of Haelegen, the longest track on disc one, and Before I Knew the Truth, which is one of the shorter tracks, but has lyrics, has the screaming, has all the dense metal production and stuff going on. if I listened to this all back to back, I wonder if that flow would feel differently, if this would make more sense in that perspective. Having had these stops every couple of tracks, it feels kind of strange to run into these two songs to wrap the album up, but it does bring the disc one, down in a way that hopefully will allow us to build back up on the other disc. And I guess there's other ways to do that, but it feels weird. Like you have to change discs, or if we're talking about um, vinyl, even if going from side A to side B, like when you're going to have to create a stopping point in your work, it probably makes sense to bring the energy down. I'm curious if there are any albums, whether it's a double album or just moving from side A to side B of a vinyl, where the intensity is kept at the end of the song, or at the end of a side, or at the end of an album, and it sort of just hangs there in suspension while you physically get the next song ready. I mean, that sounds kind of cool, actually. Like to leave your listener tense, and they're like, "Oh, I got to get I got to flip the side, or I got to get the next disc in." And so there's like this anticipation, this rush to do it because you know that the next side also has a high, and they're sort of connected. You almost wonder if you shouldn't get two turntables, two CD players, so that you can, hit play as soon as the other one quits or something, or just Spotify, I guess. I don't know. That sounds like a cool idea, but it doesn't seem like it would be done too often. It makes more sense to bring things down when there has to be immediate change. And that's what these two tracks do. They kind of bring the energy down without losing the intensity. We still have that same core blueprint of beauty mixed with typical non beauty. Dissonance can be gorgeous at times, but the general consensus is that it's not something beautiful. It's the opposite, as consonant harmony would be the beautiful side. It is an interesting change of pace on timbre, though. We have heard woodwind before, it's not completely new. We've heard piano-esque stuff before, it's not completely new. But to give them the lead on these, I don't know. I don't know how to read into them. It's, again, like I said, I think the best way to understand this is through the concept of ritual. Bringing up a church service, there is a pattern, a progression that they go in. Once you go to church a few times, or if you just look at the handout that you get at the beginning, if if the church does it, you'll see that there's a pattern. There's the same way that it's always done. And so you begin to see the routine of it. And there are highs and there's lows. Everybody sings together. That's a real big high. Uh, Communion, or even passing of the tithe plate, is going to be a bit more somber. Maybe you'll have a piano playing, maybe you'll have nothing. The sermon itself has highs and lows within itself as the speaker raises and lowers his volume and changes his, or her, we'll stick with their intensity as they deliver the message that they're trying to get across. Even when we look at pagan ritual, they have highs and lows. I think the contrast is important to get the story across. I'm just don't know that I see the story right now, but I think I'm coming around to the idea of the general concept of putting this contrast in here, of having these two songs, and not even just these two, also Angel of Sovereignty breaking up the energy of Djennaration and Caela, and Haelegen and Before I Knew the Truth, and Daily Bread bringing us into the album. I think it's hilarious. I started off saying I didn't want to bring up the vocals too often, if at all, after my initial time, because they are what they are. They're not my cup of tea. I don't need to rag on them. But then as I get into the album, I find more and more positive things to say about them, and I keep bringing them up. Here though, I can't make out what the lyrics are. I have the lyrics in front of me for Before I Knew the Truth. I wanted to line them up, right? Because I can't make heads or tails of the screaming. I thought maybe if I had the words, I'd be able to use my mind to inject the syllables into the screaming, so maybe I could hear it that way. And I can't. It's completely no. It's not. I don't think there's any way to listen to these lyrics and hear. Sorry, to listen to the vocals and hear the lyrics. And that kind of brought up something interesting. In a sense, the vocals are kind of otherworldly. I don't know if it's accurate to say that Ravina is like or analogous to a preacher. She has her ideology and she does present it in her music for consumption. That's not the right word. Engagement? For people to learn, for people to engage with, for people to be presented to. But does that make her a preacher? I don't know. But I do think that reading the lyrics here and reading some of the lyrics to some of the other tracks we've checked out from them in the past, I think having a preacher who is barely distinguishable, where you can barely make out syllables, much less words or sentences, giving them this otherworldly feel makes perfect sense with the topics that's being spoken about, and more importantly, how they're being spoken about, the metaphors and ideas that are being used to convey the message. It all feels wild and out of this world, and I think it kind of lines up to have a vocal style that lines up with that. It's not just the words that are wild, it's also the person presenting them, the way they're being presented. And it's giving me a bit of an artistic appreciation for the vocal delivery, which, as I talked about in the past, I kind of don't get. And I don't know if this is the intent either, but even if it isn't, I think it helps me appreciate them just a little bit more beyond the sheer technique of it, which I will always have an appreciation of anybody doing harsh vocals. It is doing vocals in general. I'm going to have an appreciation for it, especially elegant or strong vocal techniques. But if I can see the artistic angle to it, it adds that, just that little bit more to it all. Let me check out some lyrics for Before I Knew the Truth, and then we'll dive into Disc 2. I don't know why I said it like that. So, once again, we have concepts of growth, time, personal growth, I should say. It says, hurl my ancient cries into the sky. Now, I'm curious what ancient means here. Is it that the cries themselves are something that people have been complaining about for years? Or is this saying that these are the old issues that I've had, things I've complained about when I was younger? I don't know. It says, hurl the ancient cries into the sky. The arrows rain on sorely needed sheaves of life, under the red lines, under the laws of Haelegen's wings and claws. Beating and grasping at hair that I pulled back, plans that I made for yesterday's world, before I knew the truth, before I grew. It almost feels as if being dragged into this new world. Haelegen, which I thought was an afterlife, is now represented as having wings and claws. This person metaphorically pulled their hair back, which tends to, at least to me, symbolize getting ready to do work. I pull my hair back when I'm, going out to do yard work. Sometimes if I'm working out, if I'm going to cook, anytime cleaning around the house, anytime I need to get my hair out of my face so I can focus on what's ahead of me. It's kind of the reason to do it, aside from, cosmetic reasons and stuff like that. Beating and grasping at the hair that I pulled back. Plans that I made for yesterday's world before I knew the truth, before I grew. So the concept, once again, of the past self. Past me made plans, not for today, but for still the past. Plans that I made for yesterday's world. Not only have I changed, but the world has also changed since I made these plans. Plans that were made before I knew the truth and I grew. Man, I feel like I'm right on the cusp of it, but I have no idea. So I'm changed now. What do the plans have to do with anything, though? I don't know. There's only one more stanza. It says, "My blood is broken, the sacks lined up to take my life under the dead lights, under the laws of Haelegen's wings and claws, flailing and clutching at hair that I grew back, plans that I made when yesterday's God controlled the facts." Yeah, I don't know. There feels like there is an intensity of today that has been brought about because of a reluctance in the past to do what was needed because they weren't aware of what that was. They didn't know the truth. They were under the facts of yesterday's God. They were being controlled by yesterday's God. Now, I don't know much about Ravina. I don't want to make too many speculations, but this feels like, especially since yesterday's God is capitalized G, it makes me think, especially given all of the Christian allusions and the Catholic ceremonial parallels that we've been hearing in the music, that they might have grown up in a Catholic or Christian Jesus and God style religion. And this is them talking about coming out from that, finding something on the other side. They were controlled by the teachings of the God of yesterday, that would be the Christian God. And now they know the truth and they have grown up, moving away from the plans that they had then. I'm still not quite sure about everything else, but at least that part is certain to me, and it lines up with stuff that we explored in Caela or Caela. Still don't know how to pronounce that one. The ideas of being in the present and understanding where you want to go and where you came from, and to focus on the right things about all of that. You don't want to focus on the bad failures of your past, but you do want to focus on the good failures, the ones that you learned things from that made you who you are today, in hopes that you can set up a plan to be who you want to be tomorrow and not somebody that you will abhor. I still feel like I only understand half this track though, lyrically. Um, and there's no lyrics on the other two tracks. So, we head into disc 2. Alright, there we go. Why isn't this working? Let's dig into Angel of Emancipation. For a second there, I thought the API crashed. It does that sometimes and it doesn't update. I noticed that That info is a bit outdated. It is interesting to me. I mentioned this earlier about the harmonic element, but there are some really cool ideas in here, like this. We kind of saw this on Angel of Hierarchy and Red Crown too, but they don't really have metal writing to them. It's a mix between pop chords and classical. Yeah, this one definitely comes off a bit more meditative to me than some of the other interludes. But I think the heavy doses of silence in the middle of it will lean into that. Well, I was interested in where it was going, but they weren't interested in going the same place I was hoping they would. Definitely not at all. That was actually pretty clever. All right. Yeah, the glitch stuff there worked well. I like it there at the ending to create these points of inflection in the phrasing itself to shift away from the pure rhythmic element of the performance and inject a secondary layer of rhythm in it. That was pretty cool. The screams at the end also kind of worked. They were these uh, kind of narrow, you get into the note and then you swell around it, and so there's a bit of a volume increase in the middle of the note, and it was just these single syllables. Wow! I don't know what syllable it was. It sounded like a, a very harsh meow to me. Roar! Um, but yeah, so like I think they worked because not only were they textural against everything that was going on, but they also were sort of rhythmic because they came in on a ba 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 dum ba wow 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 wow, and they accentuate beat one, which yeah, accentuate beat one. We gotta talk about this real quick. Meter. This is something I've lately been picking up on over the tracks, been sort of documenting in my mind some stuff. There's a lot of sections that feel like free time to me. I haven't really had a strong notion of a home base for time signature. Like even when we check out progressive outfits, progressive rock, progressive metal, whatever, and we check out an album, there usually is a home time signature or two. For every 5 or 7 or 13 over 8 or whatever that we end up exploring, we have just as many, if not more, 4/4s and 3/4s. Those seem to be fairly common. Some bands will lean back on fives often, but 4/4 and 3/4, 3 beat phrases, or sorry, 3 beat bars and 4 beat bars are the most common time signatures in a lot of popular mainstream music. And so This sort of stands out to me because I do count some of these sections. We had 5 in here. We had a 7 broken up into a grouping of 3 and then a grouping of 4. Even that final rhythm, bum, 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 that's 5 right there. A lot of that song took place in 5, but there's also a lot of sections that I just do not understand what's going on rhythmically. Part of it is because the band just doesn't like accent beats. Anytime that we have the tremolo picking going on or 16th note picking on the guitars, we get these fast double bass kicks or snare rolls or whatever. There's no accent point, and an accent note is going to be the one that's heavier than the others. It's louder, it's more emphasized. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's an emphasized 1. It can also be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's different ways to emphasize it, but regardless, a common one is to just emphasize the first one because it's going to be on a downbeat of whatever. And then that also gives you an emphasis of the beat itself, which gives you something to groove along to. And every time that we enter a groovy section, this is when they decide to actually incorporate rhythmic accentuation. But a lot of the time when we have the faster notes coming out, there is no rhythmic accentuation at all, which means that I don't have an idea of the pulse. I have to figure it out for myself based on phrasing and then how I would go about separating that out. If I can count up to 16, then I feel like the phrase is reset. I might call that 4/4, but maybe it doesn't feel like 4/4. I don't. It really depends on the situation, but usually I don't get a nice even 16. I'll get something like 17 or 20, or I'll lose count because they'll play around with repeated phrases that make me think that we've started a phrase over when we actually haven't, which was something that popped up in this track a lot, but it also came up in Haelegen quite a bit as well. They will start beat 1 with a specific phrase. Maybe it's just 2 notes. Ba-bum. And then they play their lick, whatever it is. Ba-bum, ba-ba-ba-da-bum, bum-bum-bum. I'm making things up, okay? But then the next time that I hear ba-bum, I'm expecting that to be the beginning of the phrase. That's how we started it the first time. But now that's actually how they're ending it. And then they're starting it again. So we have the ba-bum back to back. We have a ba-bum, and then it goes into the lick. So I'm like, okay. So I'm like, the first time I hear it, it's part of the bar. Well, the next time we go through it, they repeat it 4 times. So we've extended it out an extra 3 beats past that. So the first time around might have only been 7 beats. The second time around ends up being 8. And the third time around ends up being 10, 11. It makes it difficult to figure out what's going on because the phrase is constantly changing and they're not telling me what the backbeat is to begin with. It's really easy to get lost in the chaos of it all. And that has been my experience predominantly through this album. There are times I'm like, oh, this is 4/4. We're in a 3 beat phrase here. This is a 5 or this is a 7. But those are the rarities. The majority of the time, it just feels like free time. This is only worsened or made better, depending on your perspective on it, by the use of polyrhythm? Polymeter. I think both, depending on the song and section. For instance, in this track, we have the drums and the guitars giving us that core lick that I've already sung a couple of times in the middle of our track and at the end. There are some clean choir-esque vocals that sit off to the left, I think, that are doing their own phrasing pattern. Whatever. Oh, you know what? It wasn't the 5. It was the part before that when I couldn't figure out the time signature. So if I followed the guitars, like I mentioned, I would get this thing where the end of the phrase was extended or shortened, and I lost track of what was going on there. But for the most part, I could feel it in groupings of 3 and 4. What throws a wrench into this is that there's these vocals off on the left, I think, and I don't remember what they were doing, but it just was never, their phrasing was never synced up with what the guitars were doing. I don't think they were doing 5s, but it might have been like 3 all the time, which means that anytime the guitars I begin to feel in 4, they would be out of sync there. And so, yeah, and maybe the voices were doing their own thing too, where they were 3 for this phrase and 4 for this phrase and 3 for this phrase and 5 for that one. I don't know. There's just a lot of rhythmic stuff going on against a lack of rhythmic accentuation, and it's just the perfect storm, the perfect formula for creating something chaotic, like a metric whirlwind. Not really being able to know where you are or where you're going. You just have to sit there and allow the music to happen around you. There's no fight in it. It just is. You're not gonna figure it out. You're not gonna change it. And that's been my experience with a lot of this. And I think it's for the better, as it allows these sections to feel completely free and divorced of time, which thematically is something the lyrics are super interested in, which is pretty cool. I didn't know I was going in that direction. Good job, brain. But no, that's wild. The music attempts to get away from the feeling of time, to get away from the rigidity of it. The lyrics are interested in exploring time, and, well, more particularly, our growth and exploration through time, not time itself. Very interesting. I didn't really talk much about Angel of Emancipation. It's another interlude track. Comes in soft, single instrument, plays around with dissonance, and leaves softish. It kind of grew a little bit there at the end. Changing over time. How small things change over time. How little things change over time, but how drastically they change over a drastic amount of time. This band's got me thinking. I did like the use of space, though, in Angel of Emancipation. It is something that this album hasn't really been too concerned with. Neither vertical space of layering nor horizontal space of distance between notes or ideas. It's been a rather full album from start to finish, aside from a few of the interludes, and here we got quite a bit of silence, which I thought was a nice change of pace. And once again, just a little nod. I think somebody in the band has some. They have a knack for writing music outside of metal. I don't necessarily know where the inspiration comes from. I wouldn't say anything in here is classical music, but it is classical adjacent. Like I mentioned earlier, it's like if you mixed pop chords with some classical concepts. That's sort of what you get here. It's like easy listening, classical-esque pop stuff. Um, Specifically pop ballads. Not like bright, dancey pop music, but I don't quite know what to make of it all yet. I think I'm going to leave it at that for now, though. Allow myself to stew on some concepts. In the meantime, lyrics. No, I've got nothing here. I do like the first stanza though. Pulling up to the curb, rapier in my hair. Just tying your hair up with a sword. That just seems so cool for some reason. Says turning up dead in golden plows, cutting up tubes of weathered clothes. I stomped the brain, I fell away, my open chest contained a hymn. Make the grapes take the fawn, let the napes grace the necks. We squeal at the form we gave birth to. We break into the exhale of a sire and tell ourselves to cry. Pulling on to the lawn, iron brazier on my chest, I hold close to the mother. Ananon. Yeah, I have no idea. Even like going off the themes that I've been looking at as far as time, perspective of the self, past and future, tense of a person. I've got nothing here. I'm going to move on to save face, and hopefully everybody skips this section. No, I'm kidding. The usual jam, right? If you got some perspective on this, I'm down to hear it because genius has nothing. This whole album has been me waiting around in the darkness with my hands out in front of me trying to find a wall or something. Oh man. Alright, longest track on the album, title 93696, 15 minutes long. If you need a break yourself, you need to get some water for this. It's a long track. Go get some. Pause the video. I'll be here when you get back, because I'll be paused. Alright, let's go. I wonder if there is a purpose to the that high-pitched ringing. I wonder if there's a purpose to the instrument choice. There's only a handful of instruments that are outside the usual metal instrumentation, and I'm curious if there's a reason for their specificity. This is the second time on the album that we've had a tempo on the lower side of things. Ooh. See here, the phrasing on this thing over here is not the same 4/4-ish thing that everyone else is doing. I tell if that was glitched or not. It's one of the cool things about the blast beats, the fast rolls or tremolo picking, is that they reach the points of glitch by themselves. And so you can just seamlessly transition one of those into a glitched concept, and it's so hard to tell when it happens. Yeah, it doesn't help when the few accents I am getting are getting jumbled up like that. So a lot of repetition in this one, going along the side of something a bit more gentler groove and not really deviating from it for the usual noise. See, like on this section, I have the pulse, but like, where's one? I don't know where the phrase begins. I just have a groovable idea to all this. Okay, that was clever. Those vocal rhythms are bonkers. Like we just looped forward, like the disc skipped. Okay. I thought we were going somewhere different, but we're going to retread some similar ground from this track. Harmonic expansion though? Going for more of the beauty angle to wrap this track up, which I think makes sense given it's the title track. I'm going to turn the floor over to everyone else, especially fans. What do you like about this track? Because to me, it seems to do the opposite of everything else. We do have a noisy cacophony of sound paired with some beautiful instrumentation and evocative chord progression, but that isn't until the last minute or so of this track. Everything else is sort of an interesting evolution of doom metal. The song takes forever to get anywhere, and once it does, it has such a short amount of time to explore those that it feels undercooked for me. The ending should be this large bombastic section, and it isn't. I kind of wish something else had happened in here. I think where I stand on a first time listen, I throw that out there. I don't think the 15-minute runtime is justified. It could just be me. Maybe I want more dynamic writing. I know a lot of this album has been built on a foundation of repetition, but very few songs have been repetitive. And that's where this song deviates the most, aside from the textural and atmospheric shift towards a slower doom metal approach of writing that favors slow tempos and heavy rhythmic melodic writing. This one also heavily focuses on repetitive writing of a few instruments with not much above it evolving or changing. I think that it can result in a trance like state. I think you can certainly meditate to this. You could clear your mind, whatever you want to do to it. I know I did, but probably for the wrong reasons. My brain, about 10 minutes in, not too long before the flurry of sounds came in to take us to the outro, decided that it was done checking out this song, and I started thinking about things that I have to do for the channel. Some ways to expand for the year, some visual stuff I'd like to change here, interface stuff, some of the stuff I want to do for the live streams, and it was like probably a good 60, 70 seconds of this. And I was like, oh snap, I'm in front of a camera and I need to be, reacting and stuff. I'm sure I was just dead staring off into space. The song pushed me away from itself. And like I said, that can be used for good. There are certainly songs that can be utilized for that meditativeness to take you out of your mind. It did that for me, just I don't think in a way that was positive for the song. And I'm going to put that one on me, of course. I don't think that's the song's fault that I lost interest in it. But I did. And that's not a great positive thing to say about it. But it's my experience with it. The song is quite a bit long in the tooth and drags in the middle. I think the opening is interesting. I think the first time we go into the doom part was kind of nice. And the outro had what it took to be a big finale to a slow burn. It's just the slow burn took too long to get there, and I don't think the finale really hit the heights that it could have. And I'm going to put that one on me too. I don't have my volume cranked out. I have my headphones on for multiple hours every day listening to music. I don't want to damage my ears. So I do this job with the volume a little lower than I'm sure most people would listen to. And maybe that's part of it too, although the feeling of being overwhelmed, of being met with that wall of sounds, hasn't been lost on me in other tracks. For instance, Djennaration, which I still think has the best outro, the best ending on the album so far. Which honestly isn't that big of a race. I think there's like, what did I say, like 4 or 5 songs that actually are full experiences and not interludes, or one single idea compositions. Like Before I Knew the Truth, that just has one thing to it. It's not an interlude, it's a full song, but it doesn't go on a journey. It's just like one guitar riff for 4 minutes or whatever. So, I don't know. Like I said, I turn this over to the fans. What do you think of this? Why do you enjoy it? I specifically call out the fans because it is one of the most played tracks on the album. In fact, disc 2 just doesn't get played very much. It's half as popular as even the least popular track, least popular core track, which would be Before I Knew the Truth. There's some stuff. Immortal Life 2, our final track, it's only got 52,000 views. There are very few people who listen to this all the way through compared to who pick out the big ones. Djennaration has a ton. Caela has a ton. And 93696 has a ton. And it's the only one on disc 2 that actually has a decent amount of listens to it. So there are those who pick and choose what they listen to here. But like I said, this is one of those tracks that gets played a lot more than the other ones. Why do y'all revisit it? What is it about this track that has you coming back to it? Because I don't get it. I'd like to. But compared to everything else on the album, it just feels like it falls short a little bit. But I totally appreciate that that's because it's doing something different that isn't working for me. The rest of the album is very hyper-focused on what it wants to do, which is a lot of stuff at once. This is a song that takes a step back and says, we're going to focus on one topic for a while. And it just unfortunately isn't a topic for me. As this album pushes on, the lyrics grow more and more esoteric. Into me, suffering, 1,000 floating beaks eat the sea. I slit myself a gate and slide into the goss hue and scrawl of flame into my mane. There is a peal of love resting in my palm, my bleeding god. Dragons broke into my eyes and stole my teeth. I stamped my way across the gallery of grief. The skin is falling through the apple, the clocks are closing down, the valuables are wrapped in cashmere, spiders laying hands. Like, I don't know, much like Ananon, I don't know how to pronounce that one. I'm having a tough time. Oh, snap. So disc 1 seemed to have a concurrent theme through it, lyrically, an exploration of the self through time, of growth. I don't think it's a coincidence then that disc 2 is where I'm finding my issues. I wonder if those themes simply aren't presented on this side. And so I have a difficult time I don't have a starting point, I suppose, is the issue. It took me a couple songs to get to that starting point, and then I could find ways to adapt it into all the lyrics that came after. And I'm sure if I went back to Djennaration, I could probably relate some of the stuff that I found in Caela to it. But I don't have a starting point anymore, and if anything can be a starting point, then I have no idea where to start. I do find it very strange, though. We have speak of scrawling flames into manes. We have gold and cashmere. We have dragons. And then at the very end, it says there's a switchblade on my pillowcase inside our home, a mound of stones that represents our love. This isn't the first time that I've mentioned a disconnect between a majority of the lyrics and a specific line. I don't think this one is one that will age oddly, not like the hedge fund bros line, but I do find it interesting that none of the lyrics from this album, not even just this song, none of them really feel modern. There is a modernness to them, but as I mentioned, there's a timelessness to a lot of it as well. This one introduces elements of fantasy into it in a way that also feels a bit older, and then we talk about a switchblade, and it's just a word. As soon as I see it, I'm like, man, that is sort of odd. This one word is not like the others. It's a shift in vocabulary, and I'm curious if that's just my interpretation of the lyrics or if Ravina purposefully puts these little anachronistic concepts in here for some reason I'm not privy to, but every time I come across one, which it's only been twice, but every time I do, I'm like, oh, that's not what I was expecting in here at all. Alrighty. Let's we may end up running right through the rest of this album. We'll see. It depends on what I have to say about the next track, Angel of Individuation. If nothing, we'll just finish the album up. Alright, let's dive into it. Haelegen II Reprise. Now let me know if I'm wrong, but I don't recognize this. I know it was like an hour and a half, 2 hours ago. It's possible it could be the timbre shift, though. What would be interesting, though, is if it is simply a timbre shift and nothing else, and this beautiful writing exists somewhere in Haelegen II, and I didn't hear it. Very cool start. So good. There are certainly sections of this track that 100% match the writing of a hymn. Even if the harmonic element isn't the perfect parallel. Oh. So good. Back with some more of these rhythmic ideas. Oh, we have some chanting going on with this too. I vaguely remember this. We listened to something similar on the first disc. And even outside of 1-to-1, utilizing an earlier idea as a motif, we're still hearing similar composition as we heard on 93696 in some of the less doomier sections. Just really filling up the sound sphere. This is going to be a real big ending to the album. That's actually a recurring idea we've heard throughout this album too. Juxtaposing more spacious ideas with faster ones. Dude, that snare. It's not so much the speed, I don't think that's too much an issue, but it's the intensity, it's how much force is in each one. Another one of those really odd phrases. So I think I counted 17, which would be 4/4 with an extra, but a lot of these are in groupings of 3. So, like, how does that work? Interesting decision to put a march in here. It's not a traditional march though. It uses the language of marching snare without the composition of it. No, I asked for a little bit more diversity after 93696, and they're delivering on that 100%. Oh man. You know, if nothing else, have heard. Okay, talking about depressive black metal vocals, they got a little bit closer there with them. This is a cool part. It's interesting that they're going to bring it down after all the intensity through the entire track, though, given that there's only 3 minutes left in the entire album. Oh. Well, that's odd. No. So they went for the traditional Disney finish, and then they were just like tearing it up over that last chord, only to find out that it's the penultimate chord, and the final one finishes as a symphony, Baroque symphony. Just had to check, make sure there was nothing there at the end. Alright, Haelegen II reprise I thought was neat. It was a beautiful little idea. And like I said, if what was played there is represented in Haelegen II, just in the noise somewhere, that's even better. Like I mentioned early on in this video, like 3 hours ago, there's a lot of callbacks just within the first 10 minutes. I assume there would be more throughout the track. It makes perfect sense to me that Haelegen II features a one-to-one idea that was presented in that track, but completely devoid of the context of it. But what I really want to talk about here is Angel of Individuation. This was a wonderful song. I mean, first of all, I picked this up towards the end. It's true throughout most of it. It is a hymn. Or at least it shares many parallels with traditional Catholic hymns, but I suppose many Christian hymns share similar musicality. It's mostly in the chordal work, though. To an extent. Let me walk this back a second. The chords that they utilize in the foundation of Angel of Individuation are very reminiscent of chords, not necessarily the chords themselves, but the progressions, the distance between the chords, and how they change in keys and modes, and not keys, modes primarily, is the same stuff you would hear in hymns. They, in a sense, pervert it. They introduce distortion, they introduce dissonance, and most importantly, they introduce secondary timbres to many of the instruments. The entire song is done, if I remember correctly, with a set of strings. I don't remember how many. But the thing is that each instrument starts out just as the instrument. As the song goes on, there's another instrument paired with it. This other instrument tends to introduce dissonance, but also a rhythmic element. Usually, like one of them I remember was that our violin off to the left had like a bell that would play alongside it. So it almost give it a tremolo picked idea to it, where you don't just have the note, you have constant attacks of the note rather than holding it out. What's interesting here is that string instruments do have, even in classical music, a tremolo bowed notation. It's an element of playing traditional classical strings. So it's not like they had to add the bells here to get that effect. They could have just did tremolo bowing it. They didn't. They wanted this extra element. And there's twofold for this. One is that it adds a distinct percussive element to it. Two, especially on the smaller bells, which make higher pitches, it creates a shrillness to it. It also gives it a texture that over time the mind can push it into the background. But I think most importantly, oh snap, where was I building to? Oh, yeah, most importantly is that many of the bells are not in tune or possibly even the same note as the string that it's playing with. So it's not just about the repeated attack, it's not just about the texture of it. If they had done it with a violin, they would have had to play two notes out of it. Here, we get the texture layering, the timbre layering, and the dissonance out of it, all while creating a very percussive pitched sound that is octaves above the instrument it's playing with usually. It does a lot in creating noise, and that's the exact purpose to it. And so while I'm listening to Angel of Individuation, I'm mostly hearing the strings. I'm blocking out a lot of the percussion and bells and everything else, and really listening to what's going on in strings because it's absolutely gorgeous and my mind actively wants to hide from the dissonance. Um, I'm pretty sure I've brought this up before. A lot of the times when I listen to music, I'm listening to what's on paper and hearing um, the best side of it, if that makes sense. I mean, like, it's something that I picked up on a long time ago, primarily working with my own stuff. Back in the day when I had to work with MIDI instrumentation before getting access to a performer, musician, to play it for me. I would have to be able to hear the MIDI and hear what it would sound like past that, hear the true version of it. And I got pretty good at this, and it's something that I do even today when I listen to especially songs from like creator request from smaller groups that might not have the finances to put together high quality stuff, or even on the Discord channel when people submit stuff into the workshopping channel and ask for a little bit of feedback on where things at. I'm really good at listening to it and hearing its potential, hearing where it could be. Hearing the music underneath with a different sound sphere, so to speak. And so I was employing that same skill here with Angel of Individuation, hearing a hearing a version of this song that wasn't so interested in noise. And I tell you what, it's freaking gorgeous, man. And it just leans into the idea that this group can write some beautiful stuff when they want to. It's not the first time that we've heard some beautiful stuff. In fact, the disgusting beauty that I came up with like 3 hours ago now, there's some really gorgeous moments on here, and it makes me think that somebody in this group does a fantastic. You know what? I think it's just Ravina. She's the only one who writes, right? They have a really strong sense of harmonic theory and how to employ it both for consonance and dissonance. The chords, I mean, even right here, the chords in Immortal Life 2. No, I take that back. The chords in Antigone in the final few minutes of it, absolutely wonderful. Beautiful stuff. Um, there's a real strong understanding of how to create consonants, but it just seems like Ravina isn't too interested in that. She has the chops for it, she employs it when she wants, but she finds beauty in the dissonance as well. And it's a specific spice of dissonance throughout this album. It could certainly go noisier, it could certainly go more avant garde, but it doesn't. She understands the harmonic qualities of what she wants to achieve and just how far into specific sounds and combination of sounds that she needs to go in order to achieve them. There are certainly some noisier aspects on this album, but for the most part, I think it toes the line. It is noisy and dissonant for sure, but rarely moves into a realm that I find to be too much. Now, that's not to say that I enjoyed a lot of this, because I didn't. I found this album to be overall an assault to my ears. Um, but I think it could have been a lot worse. And there is a tastefulness to the dissonance that is employed that requires tact and compositional know-how. Yeah, music theory. I just put it right out there. It's pretty cool. Not something I expected with this group. And after listening to a full album, I have a much larger appreciation for what they're achieving because I've got to see elements like the end of Antigone, like Immortal Life, um, like Angel of Individuation. In fact, this entire ending 20 minutes, give or take, just gorgeous stuff. Uh, I think that wraps up my thoughts more or less. Antigone is more of what we've heard. In fact, I think it's a really good culmination of a lot of the places we've been. I mentioned that we had some elements of 93696 in there. The entire intro sounded very familiar to me. It's been multiple hours since we've listened to some of these tracks, so I couldn't place it perfectly, but it did sound like something we had explored once before. Once again, they have plenty of callbacks and foreshadowings throughout here, so it's very possible that that was just one of those. Um, but aside from that, it was 14 minutes, and as diverse and wild and changing as it was up until like the 10-minute mark, it did drag a bit towards the end, though I appreciate the final couple of minutes on that one. It also was a lot of a lot, though, and I know I asked for some diversity after 93696, and they gave it to me in spades, almost too much, more than I could handle. But I will certainly take that over the stagnation that we saw in 93696. It also doesn't help that we are almost 4 hours into this video. What time is it? Oof, jeez. I took like a half-hour lunch break, so like 4.5 hours. 5 hours. Since I hit the record button minus lunchtime. Um, yeah, I've been at this for a while, and part of my fatigue, personal fatigue from recording and analyzing all that stuff, is probably also playing into, uh, also 93696, but primarily Antigone. It's at the end of a very long journey slash workday for me. Yeah, I'm looking through my notes, and I think everything I've spoken what I need to speak about it. I don't think any of my thoughts have really changed. I don't know if that's because I haven't found any more answers or because I pretty much nailed what the album was doing near the beginning, but my thoughts on elevation and transcendence, trances, repetition, theme and motifs, the disgusting beauty, or to put in other words, finding beauty in the ugly, finding beauty in the less visually appealing. All these things are still exactly where I felt them to be at the beginning. They are constants throughout the album that are continuously explored in ways that I think benefit the growth of the album and lean into the themes that they're attempting to explore. Even if I'm not 100% sure what those themes are, all the time. The first disc certainly makes a bit more sense to me than the second. I mean, the meter, polyrhythmic stuff, we just continued to see more of that. It wasn't really a thematic thing there. Yeah, I mean, that covers all my notes. So let's hit some lyrics for Antigone II. And let's bring this monster of a video home. Alright, for the last time today, I have no idea what's going on, but I have a small grasp on things. This one does seem to be about the conclusion of a transformation, though. And transformation is something we've been exploring today, although not particularly something I've been alluding to intently, but something that has been sitting on the periphery of today's discussion. It's not just about ensuring that you become someone that you want to, that you think is worthy of your own love, but about the transformation in that. The transformation is both the process and the end result simultaneously. We end the album with "O Shadow of What Never Was, but Seems to Have Been, and to have been lost. You've done your job. I blow my angel's robe to the crooked road." I really like this. The idea of blowing the angel's robe to the crooked road. Crooked, of course, speaks to about evil ways. So you get rid of your angelic robe of good and you throw it on the crooked road that presumably you're walking now. But it's spoken about in a way that, at least to me, seems positive. Going back to some of the older lyrics, it's possible that they did not feel themselves wearing this angel's robe. Because remember, they didn't say they were angelic. They just had the robe of an angel. It was a disguise, so to speak. They threw it to the crooked road. I really like that, especially if it lines up with the ideas of becoming somebody who you feel you're more fit to be. Now, as for the rest of this, I don't know. There's so much flowery language, metaphor, metaphors deep within metaphors. It really requires a deep understanding of, I think, both the ideology of Ravenna and maybe even an understanding of her as a person. I don't know how reflective this is of the artist, how far divorced the music is from the creator. Is this just a story? How much of them have they injected into it? That kind of deal. I don't know where the line is drawn, so it's difficult to say how much more I would understand this if I knew who she was, maybe what her story was, or is. I suppose is the word there. But it does seem to be a series of stanzas about growing up and getting outside of the realms of something. I'm not sure what it is. And having made this progress and left this area, they now feel strong enough to cast away the mask that they wore before, the angel's robe. Again, that's a very loose interpretation here, and it might not even be an accurate one, but it's what I've got for this exceptionally dense. Here's the thing, too, man. There's only 7 songs with lyrics, and I felt like I've read pages and pages and pages of prose. It is dense for what it is. Most of the songs don't have a lot of lyrics to them, if they have lyrics at all, but the lyrics that are there are concise. They carry a lot of weight with a small amount of syllables. It is exceptionally impressive to, well, even for me, who I haven't decoded probably like a quarter of what's actually been injected into the lyrics here, but I can see that there's so much information encoded in such a small amount of words. Everything is specifically picked to convey maximum information. It's intense, but exceptionally well done, and I have to have nothing but appreciation and respect for the effort that went into just the lyrical side of things. The musical side is, I mean, I have appreciation for it. It is not my cup of tea. It has some really beautiful moments in it, but I also appreciate what it is. Sometimes when I'll listen to music, I'll have some criticism for it. Maybe the production should have done this, or maybe they could have done this thing in this one bridge or something like that. But I usually have those thoughts for more iterative musics. I don't think I usually have those criticisms for things that are more progressive or thinking outside the box, but especially for something like this, I feel like anything I would do to make it more palatable to my tastes would remove something that makes it special. And so while I don't enjoy it, and I probably will never come back to it, I'm really glad it exists. And I'm glad I've had a chance to go through it. There's not much else like it. So I kind of feel the same way with the Mars Volta. There's nobody's doing something like this. I would feel really bad to suggest anything that removes something this unique from the art that we have. Those are my thoughts. Liturgy's 93696. Let me know what you thought of this album. Did you enjoy it? Anything that stood out to you? Anything you'd like to correct me on? Add on to what I said? Uh, Give me information about anything related to this? Maybe there's, I don't know. I went into this with no knowledge. I came out with, I think, like 10% of an understanding. um, and I'd love to understand more. Not all of it. I've thought about digging into the whole ideology. I know there's like papers written or books or something that Ravina put together for this, and that's a bit too much for me, I think. Especially since some of it is exceptionally philosophical, it goes right over my head. Um, but yeah, like lighter reading. Anybody wants to help me out with some lighter reading of this? I'm never going to get a full understanding of this album, and I've made peace with that. Above the comment section in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. There's just a ton of stuff in there. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to do a live stream. Yeah, join us for that. The songs are pre-picked, but the conversation isn't. So jump in, hang out, check out some cool music, and engage in some fun talk. I'm really easy to sidetrack, and we'll just start talking about pancakes or something randomly. I don't know where the conversation. What did we talk about? I think it was 2 weeks ago. We got on topic of bodybuilding for some reason. I'm not even a bodybuilder. Where did that come from? I don't know. It's just fun. How do I wrap this up again? Oh yeah. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.